In today's episode, we're talking about expiring revenue versus accumulating revenue, and specifically why your revenue model isn't producing predictable income. Let's get into it. I was recently speaking to a founder in our ecosystem. This is a woman I recently met. She's doing around $400,000 per year in annual revenue. And to put that into context, that actually marks her in the top 3 to 4% of women led businesses globally. She's respected in her field. She has strong revenue. This is a woman led business that is, by all measures, a successful, established business. But the problem is that she feels miserable. And those were her words. She feels miserable in her business. Her company, her take home, so what she nets at the end of the day for her family, is between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. And she honestly feels that, that's not enough. And I would agree with her, given how much she's working. The business has cash flow crunches, and there is really high cognitive load for her. Now, the reality is that when you're in that situation, I've certainly been in that situation, it feels like an N1 kind of situation. Like you're in it and you just feel so alone. It's so overwhelming. It's so frustrating. The reality is, inside the Safi media ecosystem, we talk to hundreds of founders a year. And the system that she was describing, or the experience that she was describing, is actually very common. It doesn't make it any less painful, but it's very common. And when you're in it, you can feel incredibly stuck. I want to contrast that experience with another founder inside our ecosystem. I met this founder probably about 18 months ago, close to 2 years now. So at the point when I met her, she had a very similar revenue level. She was doing about $500,000 in sales. So also very established business in the top, 3 to 4% of women-owned companies globally, really successful in that way. And she knew that she was working too hard. That was just something that she didn't want to tolerate. She wanted more scale. She was working too hard. And it's not just she was working too hard in terms of the hours that she was putting in. She felt that the business was too dependent on her. So it was very high cognitive load, similar to entrepreneur A that I described earlier. We'll call this one entrepreneur B. So the core focus for her was creating more predictability and creating more personal margin. In the dual business model, we call that open time. And that's when you have strong revenue growth, you have strong profit, but you also have open time where you're not spending 100% of your time stuck in delivery. You're actually able to be a CEO. You have time to think, strategize, and truly drive the business forward. So this was really, her ultimate goal. So over a 12-month period, we co-built some key things. So the first thing was she had a strong customer acquisition process in place, and we didn't necessarily touch it. So there were tweaks there. What we did do was structure it such that it was systematized and could be not just delivered by somebody else, but led by somebody else. So that was thing number one, really codifying and structuring the customer acquisition process that was in place. The second thing that we did was to restructure her team. So that involved redefining roles for some of the key people that were in her team, and then eliminating some people who their roles just didn't belong in the existing structure anymore. And then the third thing that we did was to introduce revenue expansion. So when I met her, it was basically a customer would buy one thing. And we knew that a core way to grow and compound her revenue is if we could get people buying more than one thing. So we introduced revenue expansion. About 14, 15 months later, she did over $1 million in annual sales, and her take home is close to $750,000 a year. She's not hurting, okay? So if you were to sit down with both of these women, you would be like, wow, I'm talking to really intelligent people, very, seasoned operators, just great women. But the inside of the business feels very different for both of them. Entrepreneur A feels it's tough inside her business, feels really difficult. Entrepreneur B, she has freedom. She has margin, she has space, she has room to maneuver and room to move. She ultimately has agency. And it's not that entrepreneur B is so much smarter than entrepreneur A. It's not that she's in a better market. And I would tell you if she were, because that is a real thing. Being in the right market at the right time absolutely makes a difference in business, but that is not the case here. The core difference when I really analyze these two businesses is entrepreneur A, the first entrepreneur I told you about, she has expiring revenue. And entrepreneur B has accumulating revenue. And the difference between a revenue model that expires or a revenue that accumulates is not only hundreds of thousands, if not millions in enterprise value. It is the compounding effect of all the profits you can bank and get compound interest in over time. It is all of the time you get back with your family and for yourself. It's all of those things, but ultimately it is huge peace of mind and the pride in knowing that you are building something that accumulates and compounds rather than having to get up and get back on the treadmill every single day. So, in this episode, we're going to define number one, what is expiring revenue and what is accumulating revenue? Number two, I'm going to show you the four key components of an expiring revenue system. If you have two or more of these components, you have an expiring revenue system and you are paying for it. And speaking of paying for it, number three, I'm going to walk you through what having an expiring revenue model is costing you annually and in lifetime earnings and enterprise value. And number four, I won't leave you hanging. I'm going to show you an action you can take today in order to begin closing that gap. So let's dive in. All right. What is expiring revenue? Expiring revenue is revenue that resets to zero after delivery of the contract is complete. And it's revenue that then must be recreated from scratch through new effort, through new sales activity, or through new client acquisition. So expiring revenue does not carry forward. It doesn't build on prior work, and it depends on continuous input in order to exist. This, my friends, is why so many women-led businesses, so many founders feel so burnt out. It's not that they don't have leadership skills. It's not that they don't know how to market. It's that they are functioning inside an expiring revenue model. It is really exciting in the beginning. When you first start your business, it's just so thrilling to sign contracts and to close clients. But that thrill is short-lived when you are finding that you just don't have the bandwidth to keep pushing. You start getting more tired. Your business grows. You have more cognitive load and complexity. And every time you get sucked into complexity of dealing with team, of doing necessary CEO level operations work, of doing delivery work, every time that happens, your revenue resets to zero. It's really tough. So ultimately, expiring revenue is revenue that's tied to one-time delivery, and it disappears once that work is done, and it requires the business to generate new clients or new sales each cycle to maintain your income. So this is like expiring revenue is the definition of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's the definition of being in business for 3 years or 4 years or 10 years and feeling that you should be so much further ahead, but you're not. It's the definition of sitting there and asking yourself, should I have stayed in my highly paid corporate job? That's the sign that you're in expiring revenue. It's the feeling that you're in a treadmill. It's not a lack of patience, right? That's different. I think that, you as an operator listening to this, I strongly suspect you can tell the difference between when you're simply being impatient versus when your actual model is not going to produce the accumulation and compounding that you want. So let's talk about the other end of the spectrum, which is accumulating revenue. So accumulating revenue is revenue that carries forward beyond the initial sale and it builds on prior activity. This reduces the need to recreate income from zero each and every month. So accumulating revenue compounds over time. It retains value and it allows your past effort to continue generating return. Put another way, expiring revenue resets to zero and must be recreated. Accumulating revenue carries forward and builds on what already exists. So, as I said, expiring revenue is exciting at first, and we're not knocking expiring revenue. I don't knock the version of myself that built an expiring revenue business. I needed her to get where I am today, just like you probably needed her to get where you are today. So, we're not knocking that, and we're not saying it's not worthy or less than. But what I am saying is that every founder has to make a decision. And typically, this decision, by the way, is going to hit most founders between 300,000 and $500,000. This is typically where this decision must be made, because at this level, the business that you have between 300 and 500K, at this point, your business becomes heavy in a service-based business. You're working with clients, you have a team, you have a reputation to maintain. All of this is a privilege, and that privilege is a little bit heavy as well. And you either decide to get off the treadmill and create the structure that your business needs to actually accumulate and compound, or you defer that decision and you stay on the treadmill. This is the key. It is about a decision. And the irony is that usually between 300 and 500K, this is where, as a founder, you are absolutely maxed. You don't probably yet have the team that you need who can really solve your problems, right? Your processes aren't quite in place. You've got a lot of stuff that's 50% built. And anything that's 50% built, it gives you this jolt of relief, but it never actually takes things fully off your plate. So it's quite painful. And because of that, you feel that you're in a state of chaos. And because you're in a state of chaos, you literally feel like you can't move and you can't take on anything else and you just need to wait. And that waiting pattern can last years. You can literally be walking on that treadmill for years. So if you're in this space, I just want you to know, spoiler alert, time doesn't fix this. Only structure does. That's expiring revenue. Accumulating revenue is where true wealth creation lives. So now we're going to talk about the 4 components of an expiring revenue model. And my goal here is for you to either have a sense of recognition or a sense of non-recognition. And so if you have a sense of non-recognition, i.e., this doesn't apply to me anymore, or recognition is this 100% describes where I'm at. And again, if you have 2 or more of these pieces, you would have most likely an expiring revenue model, which is contributing to why you may feel stuck, why you may feel behind, why you may feel I should be richer and have more time than I have. I should have more stability than I have. I am smart. I have a ton of expertise. Why is my business not where I am personally, right? So if you have 2 or more of these components, that's probably why. All right, so we're going to go through them. Component number 1 of an expiring revenue system. The end-to-end customer journey is either rushed, non-existent, or incomplete. So let me give you an example of this. Every business, every service business transforms its customer from point A to point Z, not A to B, A to Z. Every service-based business, the reason that people are coming into your business to either get insight, to get judgment, to get a service, is because they want a transformation. And that transformation is going to take them from point A, where they're at, to point Z, which is the ultimate destination. One of the big problems in an expiring revenue model is that the founder only thinks to the next step, which means that in their service or in their offer, they only transform the client from point A to point B. That's what we mean by an incomplete customer journey. And the other thing is when it's incomplete, it's also kind of non-existent. So you sort of do half the job and you're like, great, we're done here. But the reality is, once you've done a certain amount of work with a customer, you've taken them from point A to point B or maybe to point C, there is trust, there is context, there is shared institutional knowledge. There's been a huge investment on both sides in that relationship to create a transformation. And in a accumulating revenue model, that business owner says, I'm going to finish the job. So I'm going to take them not only from point A to point C, but from there, we're going to go from point C to point J. And then from there, we're going to go from point J to point S. And then from there, we're going to go from point S to point Z. And each one of those journeys represents a revenue opportunity. It could be monthly recurring revenue. It could be an upsell, sort of an additional layered on top of what they're already doing. All of these allow you to increase your monetization, right? But a lot of times people say, oh, you just have to have extra products or you have to insert monthly recurring revenue. No, there's a key thing you need to do before, which is to have a complete end-to-end customer journey. Your vision has to be bigger than the initial transaction. And in an expiring revenue system, the founder has not thought this through. So I repeat, the end-to-end customer journey is either rushed, it's non-existent, or it's incomplete. I didn't address rushed. So rushed is when you try to take them from point A to point Z in one 3-month contract. You just pile it all in there, which does them a disservice and it does you a huge disservice because it's another way of really undervaluing your work. So this is not about stretching out a contract to charge a client as much as possible. It's about understanding that transformation cannot exceed a client's ability to metabolize the change you are delivering. All right, let's go to this component number 2 of an expiring revenue model. This is very closely linked to component number 1. Component number 2 is that expiring revenue businesses have no expansion revenue model. So we talked about the customer journey going from A to Z. And typically what we will see is that the expiring revenue founder delivers a solution that maybe takes them from point A to point C. They haven't imagined how they can help them beyond that. And that lack of imagination costs them. But once you can imagine it, once you can really see where you're taking them, now you need to think about not only what do I offer them first. I know, if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you have existing revenue. So that part is usually handled. Now it's what happens next. And we call this expansion revenue. That is the second sale. This is where all of the money is made. This is where all of the predictability is made. You don't have to just have a second sale. You can have a third, a fourth, and a fifth. But even getting to the second sale, for many of you, this can increase your customer lifetime value significantly. A 5% increase in customer retention can increase your company's profits. And for many of you, this means your take-home pay by 25 to 90%. If you just retained 5% more of your customers from their first sale to their second sale, you could increase profits by anywhere from 25 to 90%. This is the power of expansion revenue. And if you're like, oh, I have expansion revenue because clients always come back. If a client just randomly comes back again, that is not expansion revenue, friend. That's good luck. Okay, that doesn't count. I'm not trying to discount your strong reputation and the amazing work that you're doing that actually is what must occur for your client to come back. But if it's not planned, if it's not a clear part of your business model, if it's not a clear part of your customer journey, it is a happy accident and it doesn't count. I want you to move from, random acts of revenue growth to predictable revenue growth. That's what we're all about here. So that's the lack of expansion revenue. If you don't have clear expansion revenue, you are on an expiring revenue model. Number 3, this is a huge one. An expiring revenue model has no repeatable customer acquisition system that operates independent of delivery. I'm going to repeat that because it's so key. It has no repeatable customer acquisition system that works independent of delivery. What do I mean by this? When you have an expiring revenue system, typically what happens is you land a contract, you get embedded in the delivery of that contract, you're making money, so you feel safe. So you take your eye off building your pipeline. And because you don't have a system, it's not happening systematically. And if you don't have a system, you certainly can't delegate it to anybody else or parts of it. So when you finish that delivery, your pipeline is back to zero. So in many ways, what happens is landing clients kills your sales and marketing. Every time you land a new client, it issues a death blow to the sales and marketing momentum that you were developing. So there's no repeatable customer acquisition system that works independent of delivery. And when that's not in place, you can bet your bottom dollar that you have an expiring revenue system. And then the fourth is founder dependency. And this is more of a complex one. We work on it one piece at a time, but the more your business is dependent on you, the more likely it is that you have an expiring revenue system. So let's talk about what it's costing you annually. So now you should recognize, do I have an expiring revenue system? Yes or no. If you could answer, if two or more of those felt familiar to you, you have an expiring revenue system. And honestly, if even one of those situations was familiar to you, your business is going to be more fragile than we want it to be. So let's talk about what it's costing you annually. In our work with women-led businesses, where we talk to close to 750 women-owned businesses a year, I have seen under the hood of at least 1,000 women-owned businesses in terms of like their financials, how they're doing. What we have found is that for an average woman-owned firm doing $500,000 in sales, the lost revenue, the revenue they never see because they have an expiring revenue model, is anywhere from $180 to $250K in revenue. So it's basically anywhere from a third to half of your existing revenue is what you're missing out on because you have an expiring revenue system. If you decide to exit your business will be worth half as much. You will literally get half as much money. Now, there's a founder in our ecosystem. I was talking to her recently. She moved from an expiring model to an accumulating model. That was the work. She's been working with us over a period of about 18 months, and this was the work that she focused on. And during that time, the transformation was significant enough. Remember I said, we see these businesses with expiring revenue models who are doing about $500,000. They're actually foregoing between 180 and 250K. This was her experience. So she made the shift from expiring to accumulating, and she was able to put $200,000 into her investment accounts in a single year. I want you to think about this. If she did nothing else, she just put that 200 grand in her investment accounts at a reasonable return of 7% a year, in 10 years, she will have doubled her money. That is leverage. She did no additional work. She just invested the money and she allowed compounding interest to work for her. She would have doubled that money. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about compounding, right? It's huge. So having an expiring revenue system is costing you. And most founders never do that math. Like most of us look at how much we're paying this person or how much we're paying for this or how much we're paying for this piece of software. What true CEOs of scaling companies do is we don't just look at those costs, we look at opportunity cost. And opportunity costs are the difference between the wealth you have and the wealth that you don't. So the solution, honestly, the first and most important solution is to grow and to get predictable growth happening. And this is where we actually deal with number 3, the third component of an expiring revenue model is there's no repeatable customer acquisition system. This is where we focus first, because when you can start acquiring customers predictably, that creates the confidence and also the cash flow to be able to free yourself up to fix the other things. That's always where we start. And before we just go in and install this model, or install that model, or do this marketing gimmick or whatever, you want to have a sense of where your current customer acquisition architecture is today. So we've designed a very simple sales architecture diagnostic. It's going to take you about 2 minutes. There's some very focused questions. You're going to take that, and then it's going to give you an overview of your current sales architecture, which of the 4 profiles you are, and what needs to happen to begin making it more predictable. This is going to be the very first and most important shift you can make to move from expiring revenue to accumulating revenue. So to do that, just go to safimedia.co/sales. safimedia.co/sales. Take the diagnostic, and that's going to give you a very clear picture of your current sales architecture. All right, I hope you found this episode useful. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. If you found value in what I shared, please go ahead and like this video, give it a thumbs up, and leave me a review or leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week.